everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm sharing 3 DIY porch decor ideas using my Cricut Maker. All of today's projects are super easy and perfect for someone who's just starting out using a Cricut machine. I do want to thank Cricut so much for sponsoring today's video. Now let's go ahead and get started. For the first DIY today, I'm creating a welcome to our porch sign, and I'm first starting in my design space and creating a text. For this line, I'm gonna say welcome to our, and then the second text is gonna say the word porch, only this one's gonna be in all capital letters. Now that I have all of my words typed out, I'm gonna change the font. For the welcome to our font, I'm gonna be using the Biamo font, and this is a Cricut font. It can be really hard to choose a font because there are so many good ones to choose from, but I know that I really like this one. And then I'm just resizing it to the size that I want. Then I'm changing the word porch. I'm just changing up the font a little bit, and for this one, it's gonna be the Scotch Roman font. And again, just resizing that to the size that I want. Then I'm going to be highlighting all of my words together and going down to the lower right hand side and selecting weld. That is now welding all of my words together to make one piece. For this project, I'm also creating my own stencil. So I went to shapes and I selected the square, and then I'm just unlocking it so that I can make the square shape kind of whatever square-ish or block shape that I want it to be. And then I'm just duplicating that, and to duplicate it, I just right-clicked and then went down to duplicate. So now I have 2 of them. Next, I'm gonna be going up to images, and I know that I wanna be having like a vine, so I just typed in the word vine, and it pulled up all of these really cool designs right in the design space. So I just scrolled through them all, selected this one here, inserted it into my canvas, and then I'm just gonna be moving it around a little bit. I played with it around the words welcome to our porch just so that I know exactly where I want it to be when I'm going to be stenciling it onto my wood surface later on. So once I decide where I want it to be, I'm then going to be duplicating this one as well because I want a second one on the other side, only I need to flip it. So while it's selected, I'm going up to the very top and I'm flipping it horizontally. So it's exactly the same, just flipped. Now I need to actually create my stencil. So I'm taking my flower and I'm placing it inside of the box that I made, and I'm just getting that resized so that the flower is in the middle, and I did that for the second flower as well. Then I'm gonna be highlighting my flower and the box together, and I'm going down to the lower right hand side and selecting slice. And then I'm just removing the flower, and it slices the flower design right out of my box, and that creates my stencil. I did the exact same thing to the second flower so that I make 2 different stencils. And then for those leftover flowers, I just selected them and deleted them from my canvas. Everything's ready to be cut out, but I did want to show you that if I were to go up to make it, it would show all of my designs on one, but I do want to do 2 different cuts. So what I like to do is I like to go and just cut those little stencils that I made out of my canvas, and then now I'm going to go back up to make it, and I'm going to just cut this like I would a normal cut. I don't need to change my mat size, and I don't need to mirror it, so then I'm just going to continue, and then it pulls up the screen where I'm going to choose that I'm using a vinyl, so I select that. And then the vinyl that I'm using for this design today is this a permanent vinyl, and I'm just placing it onto my grip mat vinyl side up, and then I'm cutting it out with my Cricut Maker. Once my design was all cut out, I'm then weeding the vinyl. Then we can go back to the stencil portion. After I had cut it out of my canvas, I opened up a brand new canvas and then just pasted it into that one. And then did the same thing. I select make it at the top. I don't need to mirror it. My canvas size is graded to 12 by 12. But what I do need to do is select a stencil material. So I'm just going up to browse, and then I'm typing in stencil, and then it's going to pull up all of the different kinds of vinyls I can use, and I'm using a stencil vinyl for this one. This is what the stencil vinyl looks like if you're not familiar with it. It has a grid on the front and then this matte white on the back side. I am placing my stencil vinyl side up on my grip mat and then letting my Cricut Maker cut out my design. Once everything is all cut out, I can start weeding my vinyl. And instead of weeding all of the vinyl around my design, since this one is a stencil, I'm weeding out the actual design of the stencil. I then cut these two in half so that I did have two different stencils. Now I'm going to be moving on to the base portion of today's project, and I'm using this wood piece from the brand Woodpile that came from Hobby Lobby. And I'm starting by painting the bottom or the base of the piece with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster. And then once that was dry, I took my Craftsmart wood stain in the color brown on an old towel and just stained the entire frame of this piece. And I also started staining the beads. I just used the towel that I was using to stain the rest of it, and I just wiped the beads with it. And then I decided I really wasn't liking how that was turning out. So I started to dry brush the beads with that plaster color paint that I had already used, and I really didn't like how it was turning out this way either. So what I ended up doing at the end was just taking a small paintbrush with that brown Craftsmart wood stain and then just stained the beads. Now that my wood's all ready, I can start applying my vinyl. So I took my Cricut transfer tape and placed it over my Welcome to Our Porch design. Then I used my Cricut spatula to press the transfer tape onto the vinyl really well so that it will transfer. And then I'm just taking my design, placing it in the center of my sign, and then using my Cricut spatula once again to press that vinyl onto the wood. Then for my stencils, I did the same thing. I took some of my Cricut transfer tape and placed it over top of the design, used the spatula to get it pressed on there very well, and then just placed that next to my words, Welcome to Our Porch, and this one is going on the left side. And then I did the same thing to get it all transferred to do the right side. The paint color that I'm using on my stencil is the Folk Art chalk paint in the color Sage, and I am using a Dollar Tree stencil brush to stencil on my paint. And I did do this on both sides exactly the same. Once the paint was all dry, I then removed the stencil. This is the Welcome to Our Porch sign all finished. It was such a simple and easy project, and it is so cute on my porch for this summer. For the second DIY today, I'm going to be creating some mini garden picks. For this one, I'm starting in my design space and I'm creating a text. The first word I'm doing is rooting, and then I'm creating a second text that says the words for you, and these ones are going to be in all capital letters. I'm then going and switching up the font. For the word rooting, I am using the Cricut font Annie Lou. I really love this one. I use it for tons of my projects. And then for the words for you, I'm also using a Cricut font, and this one is the font Aldine. So once I have the fonts all changed, I just resize them and get them all spaced where I want them to be. I then highlight them together, and then I'm going and welding them together so they are now one piece. For my second garden pick, I am doing pretty much the same thing. I opened up a brand new canvas and I'm doing the words I will in my first text. The second text I'm creating is the word survive. This one's in all capital letters. I'm then just switching up the font the same as I did with the other one. I went to my Cricut fonts, and then sticking with the same look for my two top words, I will, I'm using the font Annie Lou. And then the bottom word, survive, I am using the font Aldine, also from Cricut. Just resized them, got them placed where I wanted them to be. And then just like the last one, I highlighted all of my words together and welded them together so that they will be one cut. I do have 3 garden picks in this project for my second DIY, but I sped this one up because it's pretty much the same as the last two. I just did 3 different words, let love grow, and for all of these, I did the font Annie Lou. I just sized them and spaced them the way I wanted them to be, and again, highlighted them together and welded them so that they would be one cut. For all 3 of the sayings that I'm making for my garden picks, I'm using this black permanent vinyl from Cricut, and I'm just placing it onto my grip mat vinyl side up and then letting the Cricut Maker cut out all 3 of my designs. Once I had all 3 of my designs cut out, I then used my handy Cricut tool to weed out all of that vinyl. Next, I can start putting my project pieces a little bit more together. I'm going to be using 3 of these terracotta pots, 2 larger ones and 1 smaller one, and I'm painting all 3 of them with my folk art chalk paint in the color Rich Black, and I only had to do 1 coat of paint on each pot. Once that paint was dry, I then took my folk art chalk paint in the color Castle on a small paintbrush, and I very lightly painted this color around the bottom lip of my 2 larger pots. And then I also took that same color and I painted that around the ridge that was right under that lip on my pot. In this project, I'm using these 3 garden wood picks that I got in a pack from Joann Fabrics. I'm painting all 3 of them with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster. And then while those were drying, I started getting all of my designs transferred. I used my Cricut transfer tape to place over all of my words, and then my handy Cricut spatula to just press all of that vinyl onto the tape so that I could get it transferred to each one of my garden picks. And I did those same steps for my next 2 designs to put those onto my next 2 garden picks. To give my picks a little bit more detail, I used that same Rich Black chalk paint that I used on my pots on one of my fluffier brushes, and I dry brushed that around all of the edges of all of my picks. Next, I'm putting everything together. I'm taking some of the Spanish moss from Dollar Tree and I'm placing it into the inside of all of my pots, and then placing some of these really pretty white stones over top of the Spanish moss. Now, I wish I would have had some floral foam because I would have rather used that instead of the Spanish moss, but I was just working with what I had. Once I had the rocks over the moss, then I started placing these really cute succulents that I had in my craft stash, and then placing some more rocks around all of the succulents. The succulents I'm using are just a combination. I have some of them from Amazon, Hobby Lobby, and some from Dollar Tree. Like this one here, for the smaller pot, I did just 1 succulent. Then once I had them all put together, I added all of my picks to my pots. Here are my pots all finished. I highly suggest using real succulents or real plants for any pots like these, but I will let you guys know I do not have a green thumb, and most of the plants that I get end up dying, so I just used these fake ones that I already had. Now moving into DIY number 3, this is the final one for today. I'm going back into Design Space and going to Images. For this one, I'm going to be creating a garden flag, and I did want to use a design that said Home Sweet Home, so I just typed that in my Design Space, and it pulled up so many great designs that are already in the Cricut Design Space, and I chose this one here. So I just inserted it into my canvas and then got it all resized to the size that I wanted it to be for my specific design. Since I am using this as an iron-on, I did mirror my image, because every time you do an iron-on, you do want to mirror all of your images. So then I'm just going into my materials and selecting Everyday Iron-On. For my iron-on, I'm going to be using this really pretty pink color, and I placed it onto my grip mat vinyl side down, so that you have the shiny side down, the matte side up. And then I'm just letting the machine cut out my image, and then I'm just weeding all of that vinyl out. And the iron-on vinyl is my favorite to weed because it is so easy and it's not all sticky. It's just really easy and only takes a few minutes. For my iron-on, I'm going to be placing it on this placemat that I picked up from Hobby Lobby. It's part of the spring collection there, and it was 50% off of $4.99. And where the tag is on the placemat, I'm going to be folding that over about like 3 or 4 inches, and then I'm going to be using this no-sew fabric glue. You could you could sew it if you wanted to, but I am not a sewer. So I placed the glue all the way down the very top of my placemat, and then I also placed some hot glue underneath that just to hold everything in place for right now until the fabric glue sets. And then once I had that folded over, it made a nice little pocket where I'm going to be able to put my garden flagpole. I am using my Cricut Easy Press 2 for my iron-on, and I'm setting my iron at 315 degrees, and I'm going to be resetting it to do 30 seconds. This is recommended for the cotton material I'm using. I'm then taking my iron and I'm just heating up the area where I'm going to be placing my iron-on design, and I just heated it up for about 5 seconds, and then I'm placing my design right in the center of my placemat, then placing my Easy Press over top of that design and just doing a firm press on top of that for 30 seconds. Once that was finished, I then flipped my placemat over and did the same thing for an additional 15 seconds. I did let my design cool down just a little bit, and then I peeled back the film when it was still a little bit warm. This is what my garden flagpole looks like all finished. I think it turned out super cute, and it goes perfect with all of my summer decor out on my front porch. I hope that you guys enjoyed today's video as much as I did making it. If you guys are not subscribed, I hope that you would consider subscribing. And I do want to thank Cricut so much again for sponsoring today's video. Thank you so much for watching.